it allowed them to do things. If the Indians were inside the Constitution, you have all those nasty provisions called rights, called just compensation, called citizenship. One of the thinking, I think this is a product of the 1823 Johnson v. McIntosh, and this is a backhanded way of trying to respond. The reason the Indians are in the status they are, a political class of sort of a singular sui generis class, according to U.S. Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice John Marshall, is because it's a convenience. I mean, he went on fairly long. He writes a whole bunch, and he writes without footnotes. Unlike nowadays, he was trading law. He didn't have to refer back there. But his point that he was making in Johnson v. McIntosh, dealing with the land titles, is that it's a product of necessity. That when you talk about the relationship between the federal government and Indians, it's unlike any other relationship. Therefore, there's no reason for trying to think through what the relationship should be, what the relationship could be, why it is the way it is. It's just the way it is because that's what has to happen for the United States to succeed. If they expected the consent of the Indians, they probably wouldn't get it. And therefore, as a practical matter, you can't have them inside the Constitution. And I hate to say it, he said it, I'm just interpreting in a little shorter version of what he said.
So following up on that, is there an ideal system in Indian country?
What's the ideal? What's the New Deal for Indians, as you're called it?
The ideal situation. Well, just like in anything, you think of the bigger picture. For me, I think of my children. You know, they're small. They still got years to go, you know, through school and education, college. I think now, you know, I feel like now as a person, we're tiptoeing both with state. You know, I consider myself, you know, I'm state of Montana. I grew up in Montana. Montana is my state. But I am a member of the Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes. So I can't really distinguish, you know, necessarily one or the other, because this is my home. But these are my people. So I think if we try, you know, there really, I don't think necessarily is an ideal situation like that, because we need both still because of all these generations that we've had, you know, from the time it had started to this point now. You know, everybody is so diverse, you know, just within Native cultures and just United States and people as we are, you know. But with the Natives, I think we just kind of, we need to be, we can't really be just one or the other. We're in both, and it's who we are. We can't just take one away now from this generation and be like, well, but I grew up in Montana.
You know, this Constitution, this provision in the Montana Constitution in 1972 was crafted in the heart of the federal era of self-determination. And I guess in our quest to keep finding a better place for Natives, I would venture to say that we're kind of in super self-determination era now. And in that regard, I think the answer is honoring the homeland and the efforts that this administration is doing, as well as to consolidate the tribal lands. And certainly there's some risk at making tribes more embracing too much self-governance, in that the strength is the trust responsibility to a large degree, which is something certainly the tribes in South Dakota would say, no, we want to maintain that trust responsibility. We want you feds to, you know, hold up your promises and help us with this this responsibility. But I think that we are, I suppose, as a government, working more towards more self-governance, trying to, and my hope is in that process, and with the work of the trust reform, doing more to put us in a better place so that the people from reservations who may go live in some place like Anaconda will always have an intact homeland. I don't think that was very artfully said.
One answer about what the ideal situation is, it has to be, I think, in the hands of the Indian people. But the Supreme Court, when the Indians talk to the Supreme Court, and it's an interesting exchange. I had a chance to go there a couple times, and the Supreme Court doesn't talk about self-determination. They don't talk about aspirational visions or ideal situations. They talk in more measured terms. One of the things the Supreme Court has said recently that I find interesting, and I think is another thing people don't get, and they don't read Supreme Court opinions, thank God, is the Supreme Court slammed the door shut on other Native peoples joining the Indian Club. And there's a big dispute about that now, a lot of law review articles, and I try to keep up I can. The Native Hawaiians, for example, are just as indigenous as anyone else. They were perhaps treated worse in some cases than on the 48 territorial side. And Hawaii tried to do the right thing. In fact, they had to do the right thing under the Constitution back in whatever 60 that they got. They had to set up a trust-based system for Native Hawaiians, and they tried to create the machinery, something like a BIA, but it was called the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And the Supreme Court slammed the door on that. And the reason they did was because Hawaii was trying to create, out of a race-based class, a politically based class. And no one thought it was a race-based class until the Supreme Court told them it was a race-based class in rights to autonomy. Everyone assumed that they were indigenous. Everyone assumed Hawaii, much like Montana with Section 10, could carry out what they were ordered to do under the enabling clause of their bargain with the U.S. as a basis for admission to the Union. They were going to set up, we got lands to administer, money to administer on behalf of the Native Hawaiians. They were going to set up a system that would create a Hawaiian-only board, Native Hawaiian-only board to administer. The Supreme Court said that's illegal. The Supreme Court said the Voting Rights Act, Trump said. The Supreme Court said they're not Indians. Kaka, the only Native Hawaiian from Hawaii, also chair of the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, trying one more time before he leaves to get a Hawaiian bill through. And that's going to set up an interesting structure because you've got Rice v. Cayetano saying it's a racial class, can't transmute them into a political class like Indians, and the U.S. Congress saying we're going to make them Indians anyhow, or we're going to make them like Indians. So there'll be another big constitutional conflict, as they call it, between the Supreme Court, who basically created Indian law, and Congress that has plenary power over Indians. And the question is, who's going to win? It'll be an interesting, but first of all, Kaka has to get the bill through. With the Republican, I have to say it, pretty much opposed, it probably won't happen.
Congressman.
One is struck, I think, by a couple of things, more than that, but I'll mention a couple of things in the Congress with regard to Indians. One is, when you look closely, you're struck by the similarity of the makeup of the Congress as a legislative system and the legislative governing bodies of the Iroquois Indians. They're extraordinarily similar. I don't want to blame the Congress on the Iroquois, but the other thing, and I guess this is just a personal observation, so it of course could be wrong, but I was in the House for 18 years and I came away also being struck by the frustration that many members, the House deals in majorities, and I don't know if this is a majority of members, but the frustration that many members express quietly and cautiously with the duality of Indian nations, the separateness, the treaty rights and obligations and the reservation system. There's significant frustration among a good many members with that. And it's going to be interesting to see if Danny and Kaka's legislation goes anywhere. And it'll be particularly interesting to listen to the debate and see whether or not that frustration surfaces.
Professor Cross, I've been sitting here biting my tongue for an hour, listening to you and Pat Williams talk about the Iroquois. And I have to stand up now and defend my people, the Swiss. Because constitutional scholars be damned, everybody knows that the Swiss Confederation was the basis for the federal system in the United States.
Let's hear it for the Swiss.
Well, my good ancestry requires me to give a half-hour response in defense of the Irish.
Any closing remarks, Dan?
Everybody knows that God made whiskey so the Irish would not rule the world.
I would just like to say that this has just been an amazing experience to be able to sit up here and meet all these wonderful people here. I think what I can take away most from with this is this has added more for me to be able to talk to even more people that we have that come in wherever I'm at, whether it's the schools, whether it's teaching Girl Scouts, everyday life and the activities that I'm involved in. This is just going to be one more thing that I can say, hey, because we talked about it. It's who I got to talk to. And I think further on, these children, they are our future. They will be making decisions at some point, and I'm really excited about to see how this will be, and excited to see where we go from here.
Oh, I am just delighted to be here too, and don't change this Constitution. Maybe my parting words. It's pretty good the way it is.
I want to thank all of you. You've been a very good audience, and I'm really not kidding this time. Please pick up some of the literature for me. Sorry, Mike. Thank you.
Remember, a reception at the Historical Society, and we're back here at 7:30 tonight to talk about, you guessed it, free enterprise.